Hi there, and welcome to another lesson within quantitative reasoning, which is going to cover tax questions. Now, tax questions are inevitably the hardest possible question in quantitative reasoning. So make sure to take this tutorial in slowly and give yourself any breaks you need, as there's a lot of challenging content within it. In order so that you can see what we're going to cover in this video, there's the timestamps to my right, which shows you exactly what topics are going to be and when they're going to be. So we're going to aim to cover two main aims today. Now we're going to cover normal tax questions and have an understanding of what we mean by a tax bracket. And then we're going to go over the more challenging reverse tax questions. So only two question types, but I promise you that they are both very challenging. So the easiest way to think of a tax bracket is to think of interest. Now we all know what interest is. You get money. You get given free money based on whatever value you put into your bank. Now the interest can change based on how much you put into it. So the first little bit of money could get a certain amount of interest. Then once you top up the next, say £1,000, and you get more interest on top of that, etc, etc. Now tax is just the nasty form of interest, which is when you actually get money taken off you. So tax also works by brackets based on how much you are earning or how much you're spending, and then money is taken off of that as a form of tax. So when we think of what tax questions are fundamentally asking for, you're going to be given a salary and asked to work out a tax paid. That is so deceiving because it is so much more complex than that, but let's go through the steps of it. So if you feel comfortable giving one a go yourself before we talk through the steps, I want you to pause the video now and give it a go. But if not, don't worry, we're going to talk through it step by step. So the first thing that we'll notice is the table that we've got gives us the tax that we pay dependent on the amount that we earn. So tax is always given as a percentage. So it's a percentage of what you earn. So this table shows the various different income brackets, the income tax brackets, and then what your percentage income is of what is within that bracket. So how do we actually break down this question and go about it? Well, the first thing we want to do is actually look at who are we talking about. So we're talking about Kate, who makes a very hefty 24 grand a year. Good for her, wonderful. So we're going to think about what bracket she lies within. So we can see that she definitely has money within the 0 to 10,000. She has money also within the 10 to 20,000. She also actually makes it into the third tax bracket, that 20 to 35,000. So Kate covers all three of these tax brackets. So we're going to have to use all three of those tax rates, our 10%, our 15%, and our 25%. So next thing we want to do is calculate how much tax she is paying per bracket. So the way that we do this is look at each bracket in turn and think about how much money does she have within that bracket. So for the first one, she has the full 10,000. So that means she is going to pay 10% on £10,000 of her earning, the first £10,000 of her earning, which is going to mean for the first bracket, she pays £1,000 tax. Now, stepping up to the second bracket, we said she is also above this one, so she has the full amount that is within this bracket. So the full amount within this bracket is going to be the next 10,000 that she earns. And on that summative 10,000, she's going to be getting 15% tax. So 15% of that 10,000 is going to be £1,500. So we've got our running total so far. She's paid £1,000 tax in the first bracket, £1,500 tax in that second bracket. When we get to the third bracket, we've got a slightly more challenging situation here. She doesn't have all of the money within that bracket. So she has £4,000 surplus above that second bracket. She's £4,000 into the third bracket is another way to say that. So she's only going to get taxed the third bracket tax rate on the amount that she earns above the first and the second brackets, which for Kate here is £4,000. So she's going to be taxed at 25% on that £4,000. So 25% of £4,000 is of course £1,000. So that's it. That's us worked our way up the three brackets that Kate is within and worked out her tax for each of them. So the final thing left to do is just plop all of those numbers together. So work out how much she pays overall, which in this case is 3,500. So the answer here is C. Very well done if you managed to get that one, but no worries if not. Hopefully you follow the steps there and are ready for some more challenging ones up next. So let's get more of an idea, and I'm a visual learner, so let's look at this in terms of how we actually represent tax brackets. So we're sticking with Kate here, and we're going to break down her 3 tax brackets. So she's got £10,000 within the first one, which she pays the 1,000 on. She's got £10,000 on the second one, which she pays a higher rate on, so therefore she's paying 1,500 tax. She's got that little £4,000 hanging on the end there that's in the third tax bracket, which is going to mean she's paying the higher tax rate for that, which is £1,000 tax for the third bracket. So let's move on to talk about Sarah. So Sarah earns slightly less, so she's actually only going to overlap 2 different tax brackets. So she still has everything in the first bracket, that 10,000. So she's going to get taxed on all of that 10,000, giving her £1,000 tax. Now on the second amount, the stuff that's within the second bracket, she's going to get taxed on the 5,000 that lies within there. So that's going to be taking 15% of that 5,000 in order to get 750. So the total tax that Sarah pays is 1,750. Awesome, let's look at Rob. So Rob doesn't earn as much. So he is only lying within that first tax bracket. So he only has £6,000 to be taxed. So that's just charged at the rate of the first tax bracket, which is a 10% tax. So for Rob, thankfully, he only gets a tiny bit taken off his earnings, and he only has to pay £600 of tax on that £6,000 that he earns. Now finally, let's look at Frank. So Frank overlaps, again, as you can see, 3 full tax brackets, earning quite a bit more than anyone we've had so far. So he's going to get taxed the full amount on that first tax bracket. So that's going to give us £1,000. Also that full amount on the second bracket, that 1,500. And then on the third bracket, he's going to get charged at whatever he has lying within that. So he has £9,000 lying there. So he's going to get charged that rate of 25% on that £9,000 to give 2,250. Total all those up, the amount of tax that Frank pays is 4,750. So if you thought that was bad enough, let's make it even harder and reverse it. So a reverse tax question gives you a tax and all the tax bracket table that we saw, and then it asks you to work out how much that person actually earns as a salary. A lot more complicated and a lot more difficult. So here's another question for you to have a go of. So if you would like to try a reverse tax question, pause the video now and give it a go. So as we spoke about, reverse tax questions are the ones where we are given a tax and have to work backwards from the income. So the first important thing for us to do is to find out how much tax they pay, because the number that we've got here, this 450, is actually how much tax they pay per month. So first step is to work out the tax in the year is going to get 450 times by 12, which is going to get us up to £5,400. Grand, so that is how much they pay tax total. So for James here, we're going to need to work out what tax bracket he actually lies in. So if we think about just what could be the maximum tax paid in each bracket. So for the first bracket here, we have 10%. If he has over that, the full 10,000, then he's going to pay 10% on that 10,000. So that's going to mean that there's going to be £1,000 maximum paid within that first bracket. So we know that he definitely pays more tax on 1,000, so he's got to be over the first bracket. So let's imagine he was somewhere within the second bracket, so somewhere earning an income between 10 and 20,000. So here we would look at the maximum tax being paid is 15% of that 10,000 of his income that would lie within that bracket. So that would be £1,500. So we can already see that that is still not enough tax for James here. So he must actually lie above the second bracket as well. So for the final bracket here, we're going to have 15,000 in the third bracket, 25% of 15,000. And we can work out as just 15,000 divided by 2, which is going to get 3,750. Brill. So If we add together those three numbers, that's going to get us over that 5,400. So that means that James must lie somewhere within that third bracket because he doesn't earn over and enough. So we actually would have been able to know that based on the brackets that the answer options we've been presented with here. They all lie within the third bracket, but that's how you would work out what bracket he's within. So we know that he pays £1,000 in first, 1,500 in second, and now we just have to work out how much of this £5,400 tax is actually going to be within the third bracket. So if we take away what he pays in the first and second, got 5,400, take away 2,500, that's 1,000 plus 1,500, to give him the third bracket is going to be £2,900 worth of tax. Grand, you with me so far? So the next step that we're going to have to do is think about how much he actually earns within that third bracket. So we know he must earn already £20,000 because he pays everything in the first and everything in the second. So he's on 20,000, but he doesn't quite, go over that third bracket. So he's somewhere between 20 and 35. So if we imagine what this tax rate and having a third bracket tax of 2,900 actually means, well, that means if we take 25% off his income in the third bracket, let's just call that X. So X here represents income in the third bracket. Then that's going to equal 2,900. So that's the same as saying 0.25 of X equals 2,900. So all we have to do is take that over to the other side, which would be the equivalent of timesing by 4. So we get X equals 11,600. Grand. So that means he pays 11,600 within that third bracket. Now the only thing that's left for us to do is take that 11,600 and add it to what he must pay within the first and second brackets, which is going to be that maximum of 20,000. So add on that 20,000 there, which is going to get us to a total taxable income of £31,600, which in this case, we're rounding to the nearest 500 as the question asks us to. So this one's going to actually lead us to answer option D, 31,500. So you can see with that one, there was lots of different steps, but reverse tax questions always follow the same sort of logic. Work out what tax bracket he lies within, and then figure out from there how much tax he pays within that top bracket and add it on to the top income of any brackets below that. So very well done if you did manage to get that one on your own, and nonetheless, brilliant if you managed to follow along my working there and understand what we were doing. Now, I know I may have scared you off with that last question. It was difficult. I know it was difficult. Our research has tended to show that the tax questions that actually come up in the actual UCAT test are a bit easier than the ones that are, for example, on the online banks. So we're going to show you the difficult ones so you're prepared for anything. But in the actual test, we can hopefully have our fingers crossed for some easier tax questions in there, if there is such a thing. So in order to expose you to the tricky aspects of it, this is going to be a very challenging question. So again, if you'd like to have a go yourself, pause the video now. But if not, stay tuned and we're just going to talk through it together step by step. So the first thing that we're going to have to do for this one is figure out an annual income. We're given a monthly income and that's not useful to us. So we're just going to times up that £4,000 up until a grand total salary of £48,000. Very nice. Mary Jo's doing well for herself. So now we're going to try and calculate how much she actually pays. So we're going to just go through our different, tax brackets here and calculate how much she is. So she lies within the third tax bracket for this table. So that means that we're going to have to take the tax from the first bracket and the second bracket and then work out how much is in the third bracket. So in terms of how much of our income falls into the third bracket, we're going to have the upper limit of the second bracket is 31,500. So 48,000 minus that 31,500 is going to give us 16,500 lot of income that is within that third bracket. So let's just work out how much is actually getting taxed on that. So a 20% tax on that £16,500 is going to give us our £3,300, which she is paying in tax. Now, bear in mind that we've got to add on everything before this. So we've actually already got our column very nicely there, which is showing us how much has already been paid in tax. So we know that she's paid the maximum amount up until the top of the second bracket. So she's paid that 4,125. So add those on to each other, and she must pay a total tax of 7,425. Okay, take a deep breath, one last step, and we're just going to now calculate that as a percentage of total income. So we're going to put that 7,425 over her total 48,000, and we're going to get 15.5%, which thankfully matches up to answer option D. Now I know you may be thinking exactly what I am, which is how on earth would I manage to do that in 40 seconds? Tax questions are time consuming. There is no other way about it. So make sure you do not get caught up in long-winded tax questions if they are going to be very, very long and many steps. So you can always flag the tax questions and come back to them. Or if you feel like you have a bit of extra time to spare and you're confident with doing them, then give it a go, but just make sure not to spend too much time on these questions. You don't want it to affect your performance in all the other questions that you have to prove yourself in QR. So this is a table that we saw in the last one, but let's just talk a bit about what it actually represents. So the important thing that we notice here is this third column, which is the total tax paid at the top of that bracket. So what that means is, if you're earning, for example, £31,500, so you're at the top limit of that second bracket, the tax you pay is £4,125. If you land yourself very, very nicely into the, let's say, the fifth tax bracket here, so the 81,000 to 184,000, it means that everything that you pay in the first four brackets is 16,500. So we actually only need to use that number, figure out how much income is lying within the fifth tax bracket, add that on, but everything before that is given quite nicely by this third column. So use this third column to your advantage, as it actually can save a bunch of steps in your calculation. So one final question for you to have a go off. I would encourage you to do give this one a shot yourself. So pause the video now, have a go of it, and then come back and we'll talk through it together. So the first thing we're always going to do as normal is identify what tax bracket Max is in here. So he must be in the fourth tax bracket, just based on how much tax he pays. Because he pays above that £8,815 that is the sort of the top of the third tax bracket. So we know he must lie within number 4 here. So what's our next step? Well, the next thing we have to do is actually calculate the amount that's going to be within that fourth bracket. So we're going to use the tax that we know. So he earns £10,000 of tax. £8,815 of that tax has sort of been taken off by the first 3 tax brackets, which means that there's only that £1,185 that is taken off due to tax in the fourth tax bracket there, sorry. So we're going to do similar as what we did before, which is sort of say that, you know, the income, so we're just going to call that Q in this case, times that 0.29, so that 29%, is going to be equal to the tax that he has in that bracket, so that 1,185. So rearrange that and we're going to get Q is equal to 4,086. So that's the amount that he earns that is within that fourth tax bracket. But you got to remember, he earns stuff in the first 3 brackets. He actually must earn the upper limit of the third bracket. So he earns that 54,950 that we've got here. So we're just going to add that on to the amount that he earns in that fourth bracket, which is our 4,086. Going to give us a grand total of 59,040, which thankfully matches up to one of our answer options here, which is answer option D. Very well done if you managed to get that one. Don't worry if not, tax questions can take a while to grasp. So you're probably sitting there thinking, you absolutely hate tax questions. Honestly, same. Not one student is going to like tax questions. They are convoluted and complex. Hopefully you'll have seen that they are doable. We've taught you some easy methods to have your best shot at doing them. Tax questions are mainly about understanding what is being asked of you. The maths isn't necessarily complex, but you have to have a really good understanding of what tax brackets are, what tables are, what taxable income is, in order to actually attempt these questions. So I do hear you that you hate tax questions just now, but I promise you, give them a go a little more. And if you really don't like them in the exam, flag them and come back to them. But just have a shot at them, and you may be surprised with what a tax genius you are underneath. So if you're anything like me, you're breathing a huge sigh of relief because you finished tax, and it is one of the most taxing questions of the UCAT. I couldn't resist, sorry. So what we've covered today, we've understood tax brackets. We've got an idea of how to do normal tax questions, which is finding a salary, being given a salary and then working out a tax based on that. And then finally, we've got our reverse questions, which is when you're given a tax and asked to work a salary out from that. So in order to consolidate the knowledge, of course, continue practicing. Even if you hate tax questions just now, please do give it a go. And I promise you will probably be surprised with yourself. A top tip is just to come back to this tutorial in a couple of weeks' time and try the questions off your own bat. So pause the video just before we go over the answers and see how your methodology compared up to mine. Well done on reaching the end of this tutorial, and I'll hopefully see you again soon. To unlock the rest of the series, which is 70 videos including live walkthroughs and over 1,000 different questions, just click the link in the description below.